Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Spring 2025 OEM Statewide PD&E Industry Forum. We'll begin shortly, starting with some housekeeping as usual. We want to give everyone a few more minutes to log on. But while we wait, please enjoy footage from FDOT's History's Mysteries. If you're in their area, stop by their office to see their current artifacts. And thank you for attending today. We'll get started shortly. Thank you all. We know you probably saw some of that and maybe not. When you have this many people on teams, it seems like sometimes your things work, sometimes they don't. So we do have a few videos within this industry forum. So hopefully as the forum loads and people get on, it'll all be a little bit smoother. But wanted to go ahead and tell you, welcome. We will start here just in a minute. We are getting closer to having, we still have people logging in. So we want to give everybody a chance. But remember, we will have a Q&A portion with OEM at the end of the webinar. But you can type your questions in the Q&A at any time during the forum, and we'll get to those while we're here. And if we don't get to them, we'll be sure to get back with you with the answers. And if we want to probably give it, let's see, let's give it another 15, 20 seconds before we get started. We can go ahead and get started with the housekeeping. If you have any, if you want to see that video again, we will be posting this stuff later, so you'll be able to view that. To get started, go ahead and go to the next slide here. Most of you are familiar with Teams, I'm sure, but we're in the new Teams webinar function today. So you'll be able to ask questions and communicate with us that way. So if you click the Q&A pane on the top right of your screen, there's a sidebar that'll appear. And if there's time, the presenters can answer questions after their section, but we'll hold the majority of it to the end where we can do like a verbal Q&A, because a lot of times the questions that we get during these forums are really relevant to so many people who are on here. So we try to hold them to the end if we can. But like I said earlier, we will send the questions to the presenters if we don't get to them, and we'll be able to follow up with you. You can also, the cool thing with Teams is you have the reaction buttons you can use at any time, and our presenters always appreciate that interaction. We do also have polls. They'll pop up in the middle of your screen throughout the presentation. And then on the next slide, of course, we have, if you have any technical difficulties, as many of us have become pros at using Teams and doing our own troubleshooting, but there is a help section on here. If you navigate to the more on the top right of your menu, you can go through the help section there, or you can always message us. There might be something easy we can help you with. But now I would like to go ahead and introduce the current director of the Office of Environmental Management, Katasha Groover, with some words of welcome to kick off the forum. Katasha?
Thanks, Jennifer. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. Happy fall. I think we have a really exciting lineup for you all today. We have a couple of guest speakers, which I'll be introducing one of them here in a moment. We have the design office with us today, which is a really good opportunity for us to think about collaboration with the design office and kind of breaking down those silos. We have a number of staff from the OEM office here to provide you some good, useful information about upcoming rule changes, or I should say ongoing rule changes and things like that. So this should be a really robust industry forum with lots of good information to take away. Looking forward to a lot of that interaction with you all through Q&A and through the polls and that sort of thing. And certainly, want to hear your feedback at the end to let us know how we can provide additional information in the future that you'd like to hear from us. So with that, we can probably go ahead and move on to our first poll. Thank you all.
All right, I believe our first poll is loading. Just to let everyone know what it is, it's going to be a question on how many industry forums you have attended. So we would like to hear from you if this has been your first one, or if you've been to several of them so far, or if you've been to all of them. Apologies for some of the lag going on today. We have quite a few people on today, which we're very grateful for. So thank you all for being here.
We can go ahead and have people maybe give a reaction if we can do that. If you've attended them before, give us a thumbs up.
Yes. If you've attended all of them, give us some heart symbols or something. That would be great to know. Amazing. Well, we're glad you're back. All right. Well, again, apologies for the lag, everyone. But we are glad to have so many people on today, especially since a lot of you are returning to the forum. And with that, we will close this poll and we will head to our first guest speaker. So Katasha, if you would like to take a moment to introduce our first speaker today.
Absolutely. I'm super excited to have Corey Melton here with us today. She is the Vice President of Membership and Talent Development for the Tallahassee Chamber of Commerce. And she's actually here with us today because I heard her speak on a radio segment called Voices That Inspire. And she was talking a lot about workforce development. And we all, know that we kind of struggle with that in our industry. And her voice was very inspiring to me. She shared some anecdotes, and I don't want to steal her thunder, but shared some anecdotes in that short, just radio segment about, the challenges that we're facing, some of the statistics and information that might help us be better informed to kind of tackle this issue that we're facing. So just asked Catherine to see if she could reach out to Corey, and surprise, surprise, Corey responded, super happy and grateful to participate with us in this forum today. And she's a super busy woman, so we definitely appreciate her time. And hopefully we can all learn a little bit, have some takeaways from what she does on a daily basis that we can hopefully apply to our industry and think about how we can improve workforce development for ourselves. So with that, Corey, when you're ready, the floor is yours. Thank you so much for being here.
Awesome. Well, thank you for inviting me. I could talk about workforce development and some of the things that we're doing in Tallahassee for hours. So I think they've given me just a few minutes, but I'm excited to share it with you. So if you want to go ahead and get our first slide up there. One of the things that I talked about with on the Voices That Inspire is an event that is coming up in Tallahassee this Thursday and Friday called Worlds of Work. let's see, are we going to get the slide? Let me just make sure.
It is
here.
on its way.
Okay, all right, very good. And just to kind of give you some quick background on, well, actually, I'm going to stop and give you more background on kind of the why behind why we have done an event, which is actually a whole initiative called Worlds of Work. Several years ago, there was a gentleman named Ron Hetrick, who is with Lightcast. He is a labor market economist, helped draft a report called the demographic drought, and many of you might have heard about this. And essentially, it was just saying like, "Hey, we've got a problem coming down the pipe." You know, shortly, what happened at COVID, you know, a lot of our adults who were of retirement age decided that they were going to restart retiring earlier than expected, and then just the bottom fell out. So he has updated that report, and for those of us in Florida, it will make a lot of sense because he used the analogy of a hurricane to really help us all think about what is coming. And he called the report the rising storm. And so if you think about, you know, when we have a hurricane coming, and thank goodness, knock on wood, that there's not one anywhere near us at the moment. What we are in now is hurricane season, right? So the conditions exist for the storm to come. Same thing in workforce development. So our existing conditions, the biggest one is that our biggest piece of the labor market is retiring. They are staying retired. They are not coming back. And so those baby boomers were the largest economy of people that we've ever seen. At the same time that we have this number of people coming into the labor market, we also had women coming into the labor market in droves, more than we had ever seen. And so all of a sudden we had all of these people. So think about that for a minute in terms of what the employer mindset looks like and what the employee mindset would look like. So for the employer, you've got all of these people to choose from. And so you don't want to review the thousands of resumes that come in for your job posting. So what do? You kind of increase the requirements. You might add, you know, maybe a master's degree would be a great way to go, or extra work that is required to do the work. So you're narrowing your field because it is so big at that point in time. On the employee or the career seeker side of that, they're thinking, wow, I am one of thousands of people looking for this job. So I've got to go get a degree, and maybe an advanced degree. I'm going to choose between work and family, and I'm willing to do it because I want to go get this job. And I'm also willing to move. That was then, and this is now. And both of those things are very, very different. So in today's labor market, we have much fewer people. In Florida in particular, we have less people per job. Like if there for every 100 jobs, there's only like 92 people looking for a job. And that doesn't mean those 92 people have the skill set for that job. It just means they are in the market for a job. So we have less people. We now also have less men in the labor force participation rate. So those men who are of the age to work are not looking for work, and they're not employed. Much of that is they're incarcerated. We also have a big dependency, whether it's drugs or other things, that they are not working. And for the first time ever, I think it's 1 in 5 35-year-old men still live at home. So we have a real issue there as well. So the big question is, who's going to do the work? All right, because now we don't have enough people. The ones that we do have are not matched with the skills that we need. And we still have carryover. So a lot of the people that are in the labor force, because of that old mindset, now have these degrees, but the jobs that we need them for don't require degrees. And so they are overqualified here. They don't want to do the work here. And if you'll kind of go back a little bit, let me touch back on that slide, one back behind it. And so the other piece is all of those retirees are now consumers of the work and not producers. And so think a lot of that like in healthcare, right? So now not only are they not working in healthcare, but they are becoming the largest consumers of it. So we've got this really big storm that is making landfall. It's going to come. It's not going to go away. And we've got to figure out how to weather the storm. And what he tells us in the report is there are 4 ways that we can weather the storm, and you can see them here on the screen. The first one is immigration. And so that's got its own set of issues, right? So immigration is one way. Globalization. So can you offshore? Can people in other countries do the work for you? We've all talked to them on call centers and those kinds of things. Whoops, go back one more. So immigration, globalization, offshoring, and automation. Actually, globalization and offshoring are the same. I forgot to switch up that. Automation. The 4th one is workforce development. So if you'll move to your next slide, the way they ranked this, so we're used to category 1 to category 5 hurricanes. For those industries that can use multiple of those ways, they can use immigrants, they can have workers offshore, they can automate part of it, they're going to weather just fine. So let's look at IT and technology, finance. There's plenty of people with finance degrees. There's no shortage there, entertainment, those kinds of things. But if we look at the Cat 5 and healthcare and construction, you see there, so if you think about this, we can use immigrants for that, but it is still expensive and it's difficult. There's a lot of compliance issues, but we can use immigration, little bits. We cannot offshore. We can't take care of somebody's health from another country, or we can't swing a hammer from another country. So there's globalization, there's immigration, automation. So yes, there's some room for automation in both of those, but by and far, we need people in place where we need them for both of those industries. So those are the ones that they're going to get hardest hit by this rising storm. And the biggest thing about it is, thinking today about our workers and our current, those that are in school that are coming out, they're trying to make a decision about what kind of work they're going to do. If they don't see it, they can't be it. So we really need to start introducing them much earlier to all of the other kinds of jobs that maybe they haven't been introduced before. So that kind of sets the stage for why Worlds of Work and the work that we are doing here in Tallahassee is so important, because this storm is coming. So if you'll go on to the next slide for us. So Worlds of Work, like I mentioned at the beginning, is actually this Thursday and Friday. I'm very casually dressed today because we've been schlepping boxes from our attic out to the college campus to get set up. In Tallahassee, we host ours on the campuses of Lively Technical College and Tallahassee State College. This is on purpose. There are other places that we could host it, but part of it is we also wanted every student in 8 counties, so it's Leon County and 7 surrounding counties, to go on the campus. We want them stepping foot and walking around both our technical and our state college campus, because for many of them, it's the first and might be the only time for them to see what that looks like, so they know where it is and it's and not a scary thought. So it's on these campuses. We have 11 worlds. So in your mind, picture Epcot. Every world, think you've got China and you've got Japan, you've got every world is a country. Well, at Worlds of Work, every world is an industry. There's a construction world, a healthcare world, transportation and logistics world, manufacturing, education. And within each world, now in your mind, each world is about a 60 by 40 tent, which is like a huge wedding tent. Each world is full of employers who are doing hands-on activities, highlighting careers in that world that are available in our region. So in healthcare, they're highlighting things like LPNs and sonography, dental hygiene, just all of the different kind of careers. What they're not doing is standing behind a desk and handing out information about their company. Now, they've got their logoed wear on and they're talking to the students, but it's really a hands-on interactive event that they're doing so that the students get to touch it and feel it. They're tying sutures, they're delivering babies. In construction, they're doing everything from Like there's our arborists, they're putting on the all of the gear, they're climbing the trees, they're not cutting the tree down. They are building walls, they're doing all the different things. And it's not just the doing, it's the talking to. So they're talking to employees of our employers who are doing that work day to day. And we try and encourage them to get their young people there so that these ninth graders, I didn't mention that, this is all ninth graders, are talking to someone where they can see themselves in that role. So as you can see, we're expecting about 3,400 ninth graders. We have 135 businesses, which is probably about 500 to 600 employees that will be there for the 2-day event. All right, next slide. Just super quick on this slide is just to let you know this is not a Chamber of Commerce event. This is our talent development event, which is made up of all of these partners, everything from economic development to our education partners. It does include the Chamber, our local workforce board, Career Source Capital Region, and the Able Trust. So on our next slide is a short video, hoping that it will work because I think it will give you a really good taste of what Worlds of Work is about.
And while that is getting ready to go, we're also going to put it in the Q&A pane as well, the link to that in the Q&A pane. Hey, Jen, could we reshare it with sound?
I think I'm not the one to be sharing it. Yeah. I'm not getting the options like the organizers.
Okay. Well, we have a link to it in the chat, and see if we can give it one more go here. Apologies for the technical difficulties, everyone.
We moved away from GoToWebinar because we were having so many issues with GoToWebinars. Any of you who do these webinars understood. So, and it looks like Teams is having just as many quirks.
We're just working through some quirks today. So, all right. But yes, the direct link to that YouTube video is in the chat.
Maybe go ahead and just keep talking, or if we're trying it again.
See if we can see if Michaela can share it with
yes, let's give it one more try with the sound.
Okay.
All right. Yeah, it's not wanting to share sound today. So
that's okay. Well, hopefully what you're seeing now is how the employers are doing these
the importance of having Worlds of Work, which is really a great opportunity.
There we go.
Worlds of Work is a dynamic initiative dedicated to bridging the gap between education and the professional world. By connecting students with industry leaders, we aim to ignite their passions and help them envision their future paths.
The importance of having Worlds of Work, which is really a great opportunity for kids to get to know some of the organizations that exist in Leon County. The reason it's important is because the workforce is changing rapidly. What we thought was coming in 10 years is really coming in maybe 2.
We're here today at WOW to introduce young and upcoming students with their career options. Show them the path that they can have after high school. Educate them about the different programs, the different career options.
So this is our second year participating in WOW, and just a great opportunity for us to get out here, interact with students, get them to have the opportunity to see career fields and workforce development, and particularly in healthcare.
It's important to reach them now and start that relationship with these students as they grow. So by the time that they become seniors and they're ready to graduate, they have an option and they know what they want to do.
A recent Harvard study has shown that 80% of students of the age of 26 have actually returned to within 100 miles of where they grew up. What it tells us is that the impressions you make on these students as they're younger are what are the driving forces for them to come and return back to your community.
In the worlds of work, students explore 10 diverse career realms that encompass a wide array of industries like construction, education, energy and utilities, engineering and environmental services, healthcare, hospitality and tourism, manufacturing, automotive, logistics and transportation, professional and personal services, public safety, and technology.
Connecting kids with their organizations today will ensure that they are prepared for the workforce that is transforming, that is changing, and that's going to really elevate our community. And we want to make sure our kids are prepared for that and will be the foundation for that or for the future.
If we can get these opportunities in front of them now, it gives them time to explore, really learn and dig into what they want to do. It also allows their teachers, their guidance counselors to help guide them and direct them as they have a more focused area that they want to pursue as they proceed through post-secondary schooling and into college.
You're not going to believe what happened. Tell me everything. I'll show you.
Awesome. Well, I'm so glad the video worked because it really is something until you see it and witness it. And especially when you're walking around the event surrounded by about 1,500 students at a time, it is quite something. People literally do go, wow, when they walk up. And for many students, they're seeing, because students come in, they are actually escorted through the event. It's not just drop them off and pick them up 2 hours later. So they do get introduced in each world. So they will explore those. They do activities. It's very fast paced. They want to do some more. One of the things, and I'm going to pause for a second, see if we can get, there it comes. So this is our website. If anybody wants to check it out, it's northfloridaworldsofwork.com. You can see everything from the worlds that are there to the resources we provide. And if this is something that anyone is interested in, looking at for your area, please reach out to us. We copied this from an event in Alabama. They provided us with absolutely everything we needed, and we're happy to do the same thing for anybody who's interested in replicating it. So the next slide, this just kind of gives you an idea for the students, what they expect. So we bus them in starting Thursday morning. You can see they have green backpacks here. We divide them up into groups of into 4 different groups, colored name backpacks, or how we know that they're within the right group. We have volunteers called wranglers, which do exactly that. They just keep this group together and not wandering off to the restroom or joining their best friend in another group, and keep them moving through the event. And that way, again, we just make sure that they are introduced to all of the worlds. You can go on to the next slide. One of the things they do prior to coming is they do have a lesson plan. They have the teachers go through with them. They have a 42-page student book with a 2-page spread on each of the worlds. So they are doing some pre-work to introduce them to the different industries and getting them looking at which companies, which employers in our region are within that industry. And those are the ones that they will then be seeing at the event. You can see here one of the favorite parts are these career boards. So this one is specifically for the world of technology, where we've got the top 15 or 20 jobs locally, what the education requirement is, and what that salary range is. These are also in the student book, so they can have that as they're starting to look at, because they definitely look at the money. That is a big draw, and so we want them to see that sometimes it is tied to the education level, but there are some real treats in there that don't necessarily require advanced degrees. Again, they get 30 minutes per zone, and we're trying to promote the high wage, high need careers that are available locally. Next slide. So these are just a couple of pictures. You saw some of this in the video as well, where they're really putting their hands on it. They're tying the sutures, as you can see. They're They had like pig eyeballs and hearts, and it was crazy. Next slide. Yep, obviously birthing the baby there. The aviation department has the helicopters. This one's, and then you can see some of the work from the city of Tallahassee. So we have all employers, not just private sector. We do have, especially for our energy, utilities, and public safety world, we do have government jobs. Tallahassee is the capital of Florida, so we have a lot of government jobs here. So that's definitely one of our employers. So this is a 2-day event. It's really just kind of the major event of a whole series of work. Again, this is for 9th graders. Also, what kicks off that day is what we call our Educator Workforce Academy, where we take about 16 or 17 educators each year. We spend 4 full days with them. WOW is the beginning of their first day, where we introduce them to all the workforce development partners so they understand the resources that are out there and how to use them. And then we take them into industry. So we take them on a construction site where they can hear from a whole panel of contractors about kinds of jobs that are available, what that skill set looks like, what they're seeing from students that are coming out of our school. So in our last one, our district is very proud of its welding program. And one of the contractors said, well, they can weld really well, but they can't read a tape measure. I need your students to be able to read a tape measure. It is actually on my job application. And I think that was a shock for them. So some of those, employability skills, whether they're academic or soft skills, those kinds of things get addressed too. But it helps our educators to see the kind of work the students are doing. They bring that back into the classroom, and then also can talk more about it to their students. Next slide. So the one thing new for this year, so we have the WOW event. Sorry about that. I kind of got sidetracked. The Educator Workforce Academy. And then in April, we have WOW Jobs, which is a hiring fair. So that is where our seniors in high school who are graduating are invited to come. It's kind of like a speed date interview with employers who are looking to hire high school graduates. And they have to be good quality jobs, meaning they have good pay, they have benefits, and a career path. And so we try and match them up with these students before they leave school so that they still have the help of not only the school, but also the workforce board and all of those wraparound services to get them situated so they are on a good trajectory after high school. And then again, the last new piece of this year is on Thursday in the 2 to 5 window. So our high schools are out by 2, so they have to leave the event by 1:30 for busing. We are opening the Worlds of Work to anyone in the community. So from 2 to 5, absolutely anyone can come. And we have about 35 employers who will be offering on-site interviews. So if the somebody from the community is looking for a job or just changing up, then they can come and actually get an interview for that. So if you'll keep going to the next, actually go on to the end slide. All my buddies are leaving. So Community WOW, it is more than a career fair. We want students to get inspired, job seekers to get employed. We want employers to have the staff they need, which builds a stronger community. And then our last, what I'll leave you with on the next slide. Oh, we talked about that. You can go one more. I was trying to speed it up here. Is Together for Talent, so that we can turn that rising storm that we talked about at the beginning into a rising tide for our community. And so with that, I thank you for everything. Thank you for waiting through the video for us. I did put my contact information on this slide right here. You're welcome to reach out to me. That's my work email and my cell phone. I'm happy to take text messages and calls. It might be next week before I get back to you. We've got a huge event coming up called WOW, but I'm happy to take some questions now if we have a few.
Yes, and yes, please show Corey some appreciation, not just for being our wonderful first speaker today, but for dealing with some of our technical issues at the beginning there. We got through it, so thank you for that. Yes, thank you. We do have a few questions before you head out, and again, if anyone else has additional questions, feel free to type them into the Q&A pane. This first one is, if If this person's asking, they don't have an event like this in their area, what ideas would you recommend them starting with to implement, or resources that they check out, etc.?
There are so many resources, and if you want to pop me an email, then I can respond with a variety of different ones. Um, I think, well, in Florida, all high schools are required to do some kind of career fair. So I would start with your school district, maybe with your workforce board, and see what kinds of things they are looking to do. We do it in ninth grade specifically, so that once those students have kind of determined some interest areas, they still have enough time in high school to change that course, their course load. Whether it's taking dual enrollment so that they can, start programs earlier, maybe they want to do some CTE, or they just know they need to concentrate more on math and science, all those things. By ninth grade, they still have time to do that. If you start your junior year, it's really too late for them to make any kind of changes in what their courses look like. But happy to help and make some contacts. But I think it is important that they see the work. So work-based learning or career-based learning, where they're everything from you guys going to speak in their classroom to inviting them on a job site, just a job shadow and see what your work is about. They just, for the most part, don't know unless they're just close to it from a family member.
And we have a question that kind of follows up with what you just said about like the most effective way to kind of follow up with these events. You'd mentioned some like hands-on training and shadowing. Is there anything else that y'all tend to do to follow up from those in-person events?
Sure. So our ideal goal, this is our third year. Every year we've added a new component to it. But so ultimately we want this to be a whole continuum that really starts even before ninth grade. So really ideally that starts in eighth grade, which in Florida is when they are required to do what do they call it? They have to kind of have a plan. I don't know how strongly they check on that, but yeah, so ideally this is what they call the exploration, where they're just trying it out. Then through 10th, 11th, and 12th grade, there are increasingly more integrated work, right? So the next step might be having speakers come into the classroom, maybe doing some projects that an employer is part of, or maybe they just go to the employer site for a day or half a day, kind of short term. Then as they get into their junior year, maybe they're doing some work-based learning. They might be doing an externship where they're in your office maybe for a couple of hours a day. On the summers, one thing we built in after our first WOW was summer internships. So we partnered with our Children's Services Council, who they employ and pay for about 50 students to intern in the employer sites that are part of Worlds of Work. So I might be a hospital, I get a student intern that's there 20 hours a week for 7 weeks. I don't even have to do the employment part. The Children's Services Council takes care of all of that part, right? And pays them. All I have to do is host them, because let me tell you, hosting a high school student for 7 weeks is quite a job. But it's important. Even if they are, say they're interested in a healthcare job or an engineering job, just being in the office and hearing those terms used, getting used to how those offices work, seeing what the professional life looks like, all of those are so important. They start then to realize how their schoolwork relates to jobs. And then what goes back into it is then they're more interested in school. And I don't know if you know, but a national problem right now across our whole country is absenteeism. Students are missing way too much school, and most of it's because they're just not interested. But we know that if they are doing this work-based learning, that their interest level is much higher and they show up at much higher rates than not. So it's building on all of those things. And then again, the internship or apprenticeship is your ultimate, high-end, high reach of work-based learning. So not everyone will get there, but there's a continuum that really starts with that exploration piece. The state of Florida has an amazing work-based learning manual. You can get it from Department of Education. It also explains for employers your side of that, so what that looks like, everything from insurance and certifications, how to do it, and how to increasingly grow that. So the Florida Work-Based Learning Manual, and it's available on the Department of Education website.
Wonderful, some wonderful information. And one quick parting question, which this may be a more complex one, but there was a question about how this program is funded, and I have a feeling it has to do with that slide on all the different partners you have working with you.
It definitely does. So when we first started this, all of those partners agreed we needed to do it. So each one of them does put in a large chunk, about $20,000 each, to fund this every year. In addition to that, we do have businesses who sponsor at varying levels too. And what that does is we just sell those sponsorships at one time during the year, but then it pays for all of those programs associated with Worlds of Work. So Worlds of Work, the Educator Academy, WOW Jobs, Community WOW, all of those things are under the one umbrella that's paid for by those sponsorships. So it is a public-private, all hands on deck kind of event.
Sounds like it. Well, thank you again so much, Corey. Let's show some last bit of appreciation for her as she leaves our webinar today. Thank you so much for being here.
And if any of you are in Tallahassee and you want to visit WOW, just take my email me your name, and I'll put you on the visitor list, and we'd love to have you come out.
Thank you so much. All right, and then I'm getting word that for one or two folks, the Q&A pane is being a little finicky today. So if you do have questions that you're not able to post in the Q&A, just send me a chat privately, and we'll see if we can get it addressed. So, all right, with that, let's move on to our next section, which is PD&E updates with Katasha.
Good afternoon again, everyone. All right, we've got our PD&E updates today, kind of broken into two different topics. The first is our fiscal year in review, and then some more current events. So you can go to 2 slides ahead, please. Looking at our fiscal year in review, we're going to kind of start with some project level information. We had almost over 1,100, almost 1,200 project approvals in fiscal year 2025. That's an enormous amount of project approvals. So I just want to take a minute to say thank you to the consultant industry for all the support that you all provide to make some of this happen with us. I think a quick stat here, looking at the 871 type 1 categorical exclusions. We certainly know some of those come from our friends Debbie, Milton, and Helene, but definitely a lot of work and time that goes into making sure that those not only emergency response projects are addressed appropriately, but also all the other activities that we have going on as we're trying to address emergencies. So really those type 1 CEs, along with the type 2s and the reevaluations that we approve here at OEM, collectively, all of that is a 53% increase in the number of projects that we approved since fiscal year 2024. So a pretty staggering number, I think. Next slide, please. This is just showing some of the other sort of reviews and approvals that we've done. So 23 ETDM screenings, almost 1,000 Section 106 reviews. And in this particular case, right, we were able to track these before through our annual reports and things, but basically now with our SWEP tool at a glance, we can have this number produced anytime we need it. But that's a staggering amount also of reviews that have taken place. And SHPO is really only down to 2 reviewers at this point in time. So kudos to them really as a partner here, supporting our project reviews to help us get this stuff taken care of. And it also, the SWEP tool helps us make sure that they're able to get their reviews done timely as well. So we can better monitor if things are not coming through at the right time. Close to 200 4F reviews, as well as over 300 endangered species consultations that have taken place through our minor activities programmatic. So that's just through our minor activities that you do in SWEPT. And this is, again, another really important time savings and cost savings that we can see. We can calculate the number of consultations that can't be taken care of through a consultation key, but would require informal consultation, would have required a natural resources evaluation to be developed. And looking at that number, we can estimate approximately $1.7 million in savings. And there's also a time savings, right? Not only for the department, but for the Fish and Wildlife Service to not have to actually review those because we've already agreed on how they're going to be addressed. And knowing how the volume of projects that we have and some of the more complex projects that require their time, this has turned into be a really important efficiency that we have. Next slide, please. So the next slide really is looking at the Army Corps permitting. We know as we kind of transitioned about a year and a half ago from DEP permitting to back to the Army Corps 404 permitting. We certainly, took a little time to ramp back up, but I'm proud to say that the Army Corps has been working with us really closely. We had 71 permits issued in the last year. That's a pretty high volume. And we continue to have our teams meeting with both the 404 team and the 408 team weekly to keep those project discussions happening, to make sure we have as smooth as possible permit issuances as we can. So with that, next slide, please. We'll kind of transition into some program level statistics. We did provide 23 training sessions last year, so that's roughly one every other week. That's a pretty high volume. And for these last two that we did towards the end of the fiscal year, the ICE training and the noise training, we had over 400 people attending just those two trainings alone. So certainly we've had a lot of outreach and opportunity to provide and keep everyone up to date through these training sessions as best we can. And this does not include our OEM Academy that we do internally. So a lot of other additional internal trainings occurred as well. We track our help desk calls, and so we had over 1,200 of those. And while some of those are access related, there's definitely some times where these help desk calls are more or less a one-on-one training. So if someone gets stuck at a certain spot within the SWEP tool, or needs some help to figure out how to make it through a certain part of their say type 1 or type 2 form, the help desk is always there. So kudos to them for the volume of calls that they take, for the great support that they provide. We only hear amazing things and amazing feedback about them. So just also want to, see all the hearts there. Thank them for their support, but we keep them on their toes. Next slide, please. Part of our program, right, is obviously to do industry outreach. This is our 5th industry forum. So we had 3 and 4 last year. And great attendance. So we appreciate you all continuing to come back to these. And we want to, again, make sure that what we're providing is helpful information to you all, timely information. We were at the June Transportation Symposium, and we will be at the symposium next week as well. We have 5 sessions at the symposium. So please come out and see us, and we'll hopefully provide you some more detailed information. We've got some a session that's kind of collaborating with the districts and looking at lessons learned and best practices from them. And then some other updates. We have wildlife crossings, and we have some stuff about our roadmap. So lots to choose from. So please join us there. Next slide, please. So we do a lot of statewide outreach, whether that's things in the community, like going to different zoo events. That could be things where we're reaching out to we supported the Bureau of Archaeological Research's Cultural Resources Day. We've had a lot of opportunity to go to conferences and workshops, as you can see here on the slide, over 20 of those. So again, not one every other week, but there's a lot of different conferences that we've attended over the past year. My favorite, next slide, please, is click probably, it's not a slide, but was the Florida Wildlife Corridor Foundation's Corridor Connect Summit, where we had the secretary come. He was on the main stage. We had many other events that we were able to participate in throughout that forum. We had the safety office release their ranger activity book through their Safe Routes to School program. District 1 was able to do a showing of their Building Wild Spaces movie. Just a very great opportunity for DOT to showcase the great work that they do during this event. Next slide, please. We're also doing a lot of outreach with our partners across the country. So working with other DOTs, providing support on emergency response, NEPA assignment, species consultation, you name it. People are reaching out to us to ask for support, to ask for guidance, to say, how did Florida do something? And we're always willing and welcoming that request and providing the information that we can to help them with their programs as well. We've had a number of different college student programs reach out to us asking for supporting research or trying to learn more about what we do in environmental management, which is great because we want to continue thinking about that workforce development, even if it's not the 9th graders. We're looking at it at the college level too. So really always looking forward to those opportunities to connect with other folks. Next slide, please. We also have 4 research projects that are ongoing within OEM. I'm going to touch on 2 of those. The first research project is with Dr. Jarrett Daniels at the University of Florida. They are working with OEM as well as District 2 to look at a milkweed project in the state road right-of-way. They're putting in both milkweed plugs as well as 1-gallon plots to see which ones have a better survivorship. And they're also using soil augmentation for some of those plants as well to see if that soil augmentation provides a better survivorship. They're going to be putting about 9,000 stems of milkweed in the roadside. They're about halfway through their project, so hopefully around this time next year, we'll have some results of that to see how that's working out, but really excited to partner with them on this initiative. Next slide, please. We also have a cultural resources project, which I have to thank District 6 for getting this kicked off. They did sort of a pilot project of their own, and we've turned this into more of a statewide approach since then, but we're partnering with FSU and FAMU to look at linear resources and trying to identify sort of the context of these linear resources. Oftentimes, the cultural resource folks might know we have a project that intersects a historic roadway or only maybe kind of is situated within a small portion of a historic roadway. We don't necessarily have that context. We don't have enough information to be able to identify whether there's adverse effects or not. And so this is really intended to gather all that information in one spot, provide that information, and have a better opportunity to go through the consultation process with the details that we need to determine what the effects are on that historic roadway. So we're just kind of in the early stages of this project, but certainly look forward to seeing the results of this as it comes out. Next slide, please. I'd like to recognize District 4 for their award. They both won an ACEC award as well as the Florida Trust for Historic Preservation Award for their Henry Kinney Tunnel restoration project. This was a historic tunnel in this area, and so within an urban location, right, you could imagine it was a little bit difficult to kind of work through this project, but they have a really cool park on the top, and they've made this really nice set of information billboards out there along the project as well. So also kudos to any of the consultant community that supported and worked on this project. Great job, y'all. Next slide, please. Kudos also to the District 1 team for the I-4 at State Road 557 interchange. They also won an ACEC award. I've talked about this project a lot, so I won't belabor it, but just, you know, continues to gain, sorry, I'm getting a phone call. Continues to gain a lot of notoriety and excitement, and so we're still excited to recognize their work on this project. And again, thanks to the consultants who also supported this project. Okay, next slide, please. They're persistent. So what are we doing, right? We spent a lot of time and effort looking at projects and programs for 2025, and what are we doing in 2026? Well, we're going to continue to focus on that efficiency. We're going to continue looking for ways to implement the laws and rules that are coming out in strategic ways to make sure that those things are setting us up not to kind of flip-flop and go back and forth, but setting us up really strongly as we move forward. We're going to look at AI and technology enhancements. We have a lot of ideas that we're kind of just now delving into, so nothing to maybe go into the details of today, but I will be at the Florida Automated Vehicle Convention coming up in November. To Clark, if we get accepted with our abstract, we'll be at the FAEP in April, really starting to talk more about what we are looking into from the AI perspective and some of the exciting things we hope we'll be able to kick off here soon. Obviously, continuing to look at training opportunities and workforce development, as well as that continued purposeful outreach, because the more of that outreach we can do, obviously it can support some of these other things we have on the screen, but it also can just support the fact that, you know, transportation is out there to help address issues within the community, some of which are those environmental aspects, and we can all play a role to bring the best project we can to that community to address and preserve some of the resources that they have that they're interested in. So next slide, please. We will shift our focus to current events and highlight just a handful, next slide, please, of things that are ongoing. We're certainly monitoring the federal government status with the shutdown. This slide is out of date as of 11:30 this morning. We did find out that the Army Corps of Engineers 404 group is now funded through the end of this month, which is really good. We were a little bit nervous about how that was going to work out. But so at the moment, the only entity that we know of that is furloughed that may have an impact on us is the Coast Guard. Others, may have a little bit of a wait time, like the 106. If you're submitting forms, there are some staff that are furloughed, but it seems like they have a process to work through some of that. But if you guys are getting stuck on a project or have a situation that's, you're not getting a response, feel free to reach out through your district to OEM, and we can, kind of check on the status of that if we have contacts in those agencies. But again, for now, we're monitoring, and hopefully things will be able to move on here in the near future and we can get back to work. Next slide, please. So back in June, the USDOT had their Order 5610 come out, which also in relation to that was the FHWA revisions to their NEPA regulations. And while I'll say that we're still looking at this from a, kind of the nuanced perspective, doing our deep dive into what all these changes mean to our PD&E manual and to our processes, we are not necessarily seeing anything to cause alarm at the moment, but there are going to be some things that we're going to be modifying within the manual as we're looking to hopefully publish that near the end of the calendar year or early next calendar year. I highlighted just one small example here on the screen because it has directly affected a project already, and that's really looking at the page limits for environmental assessments. Previously, page limits were did not include tables and figures, and now tables and figures do count towards your page limits. There's also some other sort of nuancy things about page sizes and fonts and things like that, but just wanted to share that these are in effect now and something that we want to just kind of keep tabs on. And, we are expecting more changes through FHWA on a sort of second round of NEPA rules that we'll be, keeping tabs on and letting you guys know when that happens. Next slide, please. CEQ also updated their guidance in September of 2025. So this had come out earlier in the year, and when they updated their guidance, they kind of went back and looked at us what they call the 7-county opinion that came out in the Supreme Court, and kind of tried to explain within the guidelines how that might affect NEPA projects. A lot of that has to do with more indirect effects. So for those higher level classes of actions, but they also continue to say that we should follow existing guidance, existing procedures, as long as those are compliant with the executive orders and any other sort of case law or this guidance itself. So again, just a little bit of hopefully comfort that we aren't seeing major shifts at the moment in how we're doing our business. I think many of you all have gone through certain project reviews, and we've seen some tweaks, we've made some changes here and there, but nothing that's been drastic. So for now, I think our PD&E manual is pretty solid, and along again with those changes that are forthcoming here in the next few months. So next slide, please. So lastly, we will be talking about the state changes to the law in section 33463 of the Florida statutes, which now require an 18-month PD&E schedule along with elevated alternatives. We'll be speaking about that in detail towards the end of the forum. And we do have both some OEM team members as well as design to touch on the FDEP stormwater rule. So with that, I think we're ready to probably move into that stormwater rule topic. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Katasha. My name is Brian Coogan, and a little bit later, Jonathan Turner will be joining me. We're going to be presenting on the updated stormwater permitting criteria. Next slide. Chapter 62-330 in the FDEP Applicant's Handbook were updated in June of 2024. The Roadway Design Office and the Office of Environmental Management worked with the Chief Engineer's Office to analyze the impacts of the new rule on several projects in the PD&E process that had completed pond siting reports. The following is a summary of that effort. The rule changed from the first flush volumetric method to a nutrient loading reduction approach. All projects reaching location design concept acceptance prior to June 28, 2026 have the option to grandfather under the old rule. This led central office to analyze the impacts of the new rule on our work program. As a result, the roadway design office and the Office of Environmental Management worked with the chief engineer's office to assess the impacts of the new rule on several projects in the PD&E process that had completed pond siting reports. Next slide. Nine PD&E projects were selected throughout 4 water management districts and 6 FDOT districts. Our selection also considered the type of typical section. In other words, flush shoulder and curb and gutter sections. Next slide. This is a map of the project locations. Central Office wanted to analyze a representative sample of projects in urban and rural areas throughout the state located within each water management district. Because of the requirement to analyze current completed projects with pond siting reports, we unfortunately did not analyze any projects in the Suwannee River Water Management District. Next slide. The main takeaway from our analysis was that the new rule is achievable in most cases. We found that the typical section drives the best management practice opportunities. Rural or flush shoulder typical sections will most likely meet the rule through standard FDOT practices, especially with increased recognition of BMPs such as vegetated filter strips. This new BMP in Appendix O will allow us to get credit for nutrient removal as soon as water leaves the pavement, where we have historically not received credit. In many projects, this will give FDOT the ability to size ponds for attenuation only and potentially reduce pond sizes in PD&E. Urban or curb and gutter typical sections may be more complex, as BMP opportunities vary by right-of-way availability. The best case scenario is whenever we can discharge to green space in urban areas. We see this occurring through concrete flume inlets or curb cuts into roadside swales. Designers should consider whether suburban sections are possible, as this will provide flush outside shoulders. There are 2 performance standards that must be considered to meet the new rule. Whichever removes more nutrients controls. For our study, we analyzed over 100 basins across the 9 projects, and for 99% of basins, the minimum performance standard controlled over pre-post requirements. Please note that the analysis performed was only with those BMPs listed in Applicant Handbook Volume 1, Appendix O, and the methodology outlined in Section 9 of Volume 1. There is an opportunity to develop new BMPs and alternative analysis methods, but we were focused on those tools currently available in our toolbox for this analysis. Next slide. A key finding is that all projects were technically able to identify a treatment train that met the new rule. The grayed out BMPs are new to Appendix O, but are part of FDOT standard design practices, such as flush shoulders. For this table, costs are those considered to exceed standard FDOT practice or right-of-way needs. The new side bank filter BMP is a modification to FDOT's standard underdrain. We will use an underdrain on wet systems above the permanent pool volume to serve as a detention system with filtration. In many cases, wet ponds with a side bank filter can meet the minimum performance standard of 55% and 80% respectively. Some findings to note are that State Road 20 required no changes to the original pond siting report in order to meet the rule. Cove Road offered a unique view of how different BMPs could be used. By using 2 BMPs, swales, and exfiltration trenches, we meet the rule and minimize additional costs. If right-of-way does not allow for the implementation of swales, or the designer decides to consider only 1 BMP, the rule could still be met. However, the cost to the department increases significantly on this project. Training designers to evaluate treatment trains will be key to minimizing impacts on construction, right-of-way, and maintenance costs. I-95 was the most complex project. It was in an urban setting, had impaired waters, and an outstanding Florida water. It required new right-of-way, expensive BMPs, and a potential golf course irrigation agreement. The BMP noted in red was suggested in the original pond siting report, but we included it as additional because it would pose significant hardships for the department. Next slide.
So the updated rule became effective in June of 2024. Since that effective date, FDOT has already updated several key guidance documents and manuals and is in the process of reviewing and updating other applicable manuals and guidance. Updates to the drainage manual were completed last year and implemented in the 2025 design manual. These updates included impaired WIBIT assessment categories evaluation, stormwater BMP, coordination requirements, and the drainage design office also created new drainage manual forms which house FDOT's comprehensive O&M plan and cost estimates, which were developed with FDEP's coordination. Chapter 9 of the drainage design guidelines were revised to provide design examples for the new rule. This was shared with FDEP for their review and concurrence, and we look forward to publishing around early next month. This will serve as the basis for future design training. Also ongoing for publication this year are the PD&E manual and standard plan modifications to adjust existing resources to meet the requirements of the new rule. And lastly, there are future review opportunities for the permit handbook and the waters process. These publications have been updated since the new rule became effective, but there might be opportunities to help guide permit applications. Next slide. So the drainage website is a great source of information for our staff and consultants. The design office site currently hosts a variety of resources, including frequently asked questions, document, and a grandfathering matrix. Also, the BMP trains and applicable research are also available there. FDOT is currently working on a standardized GIS map, which will have HUC 12 information, WIBITs, outstanding Florida waters, as well as the current work program. The list would be filtered to the categories applicable to the ERP permit. For example, the study list is not applicable to our permit, so that would be filtered out. The design office is also working on a district reviewer checklist, which will be helpful since some FDOT district reviewers may still be accustomed to the old rules and could be unfamiliar with the new BMPs or analysis required to meet the new rules. This checklist will be extremely helpful for both reviewers and designers. The last several items on here we hope to have developed over the next year. The Drainage Design Office will be developing fact sheets for the various BMPs, and they already have a draft for the vegetative filter strip fact sheet, which was reviewed by DEP already. The goal is to have a fact sheet for each of the BMPs utilized by transportation projects. And, oh, sorry, go back. Whoa. 54. Thank you. All right. So narratives for non-nutrient impairments and standard REI responses are also being developed to ensure consistency across the state. And lastly, to help showcase some creative innovation, the Drainage Design Office is planning to develop and highlight water's success stories. This will help identify corresponding stakeholders for the different types of innovative projects that have been successful over the years. All right, next slide. As I mentioned, we are developing a robust statewide training and plan to roll that out across the state over the next year. Our goal is to provide districts and their consultants with a greater understanding of permit types and exemptions. We want the districts and consultants to know the requirements so as to be able to strengthen their positions during discussions with the water management districts and or DEP or in responding to REIs. The training would also be intended for PD&E and design staff. For PD&E, the training will help focus on right-of-way needs for the various BMPs and which BMPs would be necessary to help meet the rule. The design training would emphasize the selection and application of BMPs. And ultimately, we want everybody to get a greater understanding of the different types of BMPs and how they might affect maintenance needs downstream. Next slide. All right, so in conclusion, like Brian mentioned, we can meet the rule in most cases with what's already available in our toolbox, but there will be some cases such as projects in heavily urbanized areas with reduced right-of-way availability, an impaired water basin, outstanding flow to waters, high water tables, where we may not be able to meet it as easily. I will note that there is an opportunity to use a variance in extreme circumstances in areas where we meet the pre-post conditions but are struggling to achieve those higher BMP efficiencies. This will require that district staff reach out and coordinate with FDOT central office, especially Office of Environmental Management, Drainage Design, and Legal. As Brian mentioned earlier, this analysis that we did used ERP standard methodology and the BMPs already listed in Applicant's Handbook Volume 1. The Drainage Design Office has also been developing some alternative analysis methods with FDEP and is looking for innovative BMPs to pilot. So if you have some unique circumstances and some float in your schedule for a drainage design component, please reach out to the Drainage Design Office for additional support. FDOT has developed and updated several tools, including the drainage manual form and adding FAQs to the Drainage Office website. We also have ongoing updates, including the GIS map, district reviewer checklist, as well as development of BMP fact sheets. And as mentioned, training, outreach, and resource development are paramount. This is the department's opportunity to establish consistency. The FDOT Drainage Design Office is working on a plan to deliver that training district by district, bringing in as many staff and consultants into the room as possible. Next slide, please. All right, so in conclusion, just as mentioned, the drainage website is a great source of information for our staff and consultants. The design office site hosts a variety of resources, including the FAQ document, grandfathering matrix, BMP trains, as well as applicable research are all on that website. The DEP has the Applicant's Handbook Volume 1, which covers the whole state, and you can find water management district specific guidance on their respective websites, as each water management district has their own ERP Applicant's Handbook Volume 2. If further guidance is needed, or if you have an idea for a resource that could be developed, please reach out to your district contacts first, and depending on the request, the Office of Environmental Management, the Drainage Design Office, or the Office of General Counsel is more than willing to assist with anything that you have. And with that, I think that is our update.
Thank you so much, Jonathan and Brian. Such a timely update. I know everyone's, I'm sure everyone's quite interested, and we'll get a lot of use out of those links. And the links on the last slide, we'll be posting all the slides on the OEM section of fdot.gov. So we will send a follow-up to everyone who attended so you know where to find it. So don't worry about that. And then real quick, before we transition to the Office of Design, if you are looking to submit a question to be asked to our presenters, when you hit your Q&A panel, you may have to go to the right-hand side of that panel and click the caret and hit Ask a Question. So just wanted to remind everyone of that. And with that, let's move on to the Office of Design. We have William Potter here today presenting, and Ben Goldsberry.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Hopefully everything's going as well as it can. I think we've gotten back in line, hopefully. But just as a quick introduction, so I'm Will Potter, Director of Office of Design, and as part of this presentation, you'll get here shortly Ben Goldsberry, who's the State Structures Design Engineer. We had a slight change in the agenda because of Durwood Shepherd, who's our State Roadway Design Engineer, couldn't make it this afternoon. But just kind of giving a high level, today is really just trying to make that integration between PD&E and design more streamlined and obviously enhance that collaboration as best we can. But the goal of today's meeting, or really discussion, was getting the whole process of project development in that production mindset of how are we looking at all options, how are we evaluating all options, and not just those that meet the full policy and criteria. And what I mean by that is not every, our criteria is based on most projects, but it's not based on every project. And so some projects will have specific needs and adjustments that could be made, and that's where we have that process of design variations and exceptions. I mean, there's a lot of value there in making sure we're taking everything we can do to make the most cost-effective project. The earlier we know that and where those changes could be, the better off the project is, especially in setting that cost and the future scopes of that. And knowing the most earlier is always ideal, but not obviously we know where we are with how we can manage that project. But knowing certain things about the project early on, like especially the letting timeline and also the contract type, also helps kind of set that forward projection of what we know. And obviously, if you know early on that it's going to be a design build project, we need to make sure that those RFP requirements are being met, especially with the recent changes in the concept plans and what those demands are, but also geotech, utilities, and that kind of demands of what we need to know early on in the project. So just enhancing that, engaging all offices, reaching out to design and even construction, to making sure that we're all on the same page of where the project is headed so that we can best set the scope of that design project as it goes and transitions from PD&E into our world of design. Because there are some what may seem like minor tweaks, but they can have major cost implications early on. But kind of going into that, we'll start off with kind of going down the structures path, and that's where I'll put Ben on the spot and let him take it from here, and then I'll follow up with some more on the roadway side. Ben?
All right. Thanks, Will. Ben Goldsberry with the Structures Design Office. Just have some few thoughts and takeaways for today. So go ahead and go to the next slide, please. Yeah, so as some of you may or may not know, we have in the FDOT Structures Manual and the Structures Design Guidelines, we have a chapter that's for BDR cost estimating, and it's been a really nice tool over the years for people developing cost estimates for bridge development reports. But I just want to kind of stress that that's what those costs are intended for. They're not really appropriate for developing a true cost estimate. It's just for comparison purposes when you're developing a cost estimate for maybe, say, like a concrete superstructure alternative versus maybe a steel superstructure alternative. That's about where the usefulness of those unit costs end. I would caution you on using those costs for anything else. And there's a good reason for that. And I got an example here on the slide. So we recently updated those unit costs, which was actually a pretty significant effort. And we updated those in 2024, which means it got published in the 2025 SDG. And when we did that update, we worked with the estimates group, and that data was mostly based on the years 2019 to 2023, because that's the data we had at the time. And we kind of went on the high side of the cost just because we knew those costs would continue to rise. But we to a point we had to kind of just keep with what we were seeing. So if you had a bridge analysis that you're doing in a PD&E study in 2026, that project may go to construction in 28 or 2032, depending on the contracting method. If you use those SDG Chapter 9 costs to come up with a cost estimate in your PD&E study, those costs could be outdated by up to a decade. And so I guess there's a statement in Chapter 9 that says, this process should produce a reasonably accurate cost estimate. And I would kind of amend that statement for comparing structural alternatives. So you might wonder, well, where should we go for reliable structures cost? So next slide, please. So the Forecasting and Performance Office has been working very hard on putting together some really great tools for people to use to pull up bid price history. And this is not applicable just for structures. This is for any bid cost history. And I put the link up there on the slide. But when you go to that link, there's to the right, you'll see a bid price search dashboard. And so you can go in there and really get a lot of good information. Next slide, please. So if you really want to kind of learn more about this, there is going to be a presentation at the upcoming symposium, and actually be kicking off first thing in the morning at 8:30 on Tuesday. And it will be that presentation will be by Ashley Anderson and Galen Bishop, and they will kind of get into more details of how to use these dashboards and the information that you can get from them. So I really encourage you to attend that if you can. Next slide, please. So, another takeaway I kind of want to leave you with is just engage the department structure staff as early as possible. I would not wait until you submit your bridge analysis report or the PD&E study and get your feedback through the ERC process. I would encourage you to engage the district structures design office or our office as appropriate, depending on its category 1 or category 2 structure, and just get that dialogue going. Get some feedback early, because it can really kind of change the path you take, and really kind of prevent some rework down the line. When you receive some significant ERC comments, you can actually have to go back and do some significant rework. So it's always better to kind of get that dialogue going first before you submit your draft report. And so next slide, please. So I have just a few case studies here just to kind of demonstrate some of the things that have come up recently that kind of along those lines of kind of engaging our office. So this is a project where the consultant assumed a certain limits of future build out, and that's you're not going to be able to see my cursor, but that red line that you see closer to the top of the slide where it says assumed limits of future build out and bridge analysis report. Well, that line actually wasn't accurate. And so that was discovered during the review, and the correct limits for substructure placement was actually a line that was much closer to the outside shoulder, which means that straddle pier you see on the slide was not required. And in actuality, I think they were able to possibly eliminate that whole end span. And if not, I think maybe they could at least use a more conventional type pier instead of a long straddle pier, which impacts initial construction cost, but it even has long-term inspection and maintenance implications, because those steel straddle piers require arm's length inspections, which means that you have to shut down lanes over an interstate facility to do that inspection. And so that's probably done at night. That's not ideal for doing inspections at night. That's not a good time to be doing inspections. You want as much daylight as you can get. So there's just a lot of different nuances when you start considering these kind of things. And so those are some things that could have been discovered with some, I guess, earlier engagement with our office. Next slide, please. So this was another project where there were two long curved ramps, twin steel box girders. These were constructed in the early 2000s, so they really weren't that far into their service life. The PD&E study recommended complete demo and replacement of these structures, and so that's what the recommendation was made in the PD&E. When the project went to final design, the bridges were able to be retained, and so that ended up being an estimated savings of over $300 million. So again, this is something maybe to consider when you're kind of making those recommendations. Get as much input as you can from the department early on, so that we can kind of vet those recommended alternatives and maybe save tens of millions of dollars. But it can go the other way as well. We could discover something during that collaboration that would identify areas where maybe we need to spend more money than we originally thought, which can also be an issue. So next slide, please. And this is the last one. So this is a long elevated viaduct, and the PD&E study recommended a high density of straddle piers along this viaduct, and it was just an issue of geometry of where they could put those columns for those substructures. And through coordination with our office and asking the right questions and kind of talking through it, they were able to kind of go down a route where they could do small right-of-way takes. And that's the red area you see at the top of the picture, the red shading. So they could do some small right-of-way takes, push the roadway out a little bit, and make some more room in the median so they could use more conventional type piers. And this ended up being an estimated savings of over $100 million, and that included the right-of-way acquisition. So that's all I had from the structure side, and hopefully you found that helpful. And I'll hand it off to Will.
Sure. Thanks, Ben. You can go to the next slide. Yeah, and kind of what you get with this mantra is it's sometimes those early conversations help, and it's not so much having to do more work. It's just conversations so that we can help set that direction, more or less of what things are on the table, what things are not, and sometimes it's little things. And when you get that design review on your study that comes in, make sure you're digging into that design staff, because sometimes they may just take it and just take it lightly to a certain degree, but we need to make sure we're asking the hard questions too, and getting there. Kind of going into the next side of it, and I don't know if I need really after Jonathan and Brian's presentation, not sure how much I need to dive into it, because I think they sold it very well. But there are a lot of resources out there, especially with the new stormwater rule. The resources that design office and the drainage office has taken kind of a big initiative to kind of get ahead of it as much as they can, is providing some of these resources to help the agency and help these projects along, to make sure we have the right tools in place so that we're not getting held up in the process. And one of the big ones is part of that operations and maintenance plan. And what you see here is the FDOT cost estimate worksheet. Just kind of give a high level of it, and obviously note that resource is there, and we'll go from there. So next slide. Also, within that, the operation and maintenance plan form. So the idea here is, we provide that assistance so that you're not doing it per project. Obviously, we're a large agency managing a lot of projects, or a lot of these efforts that go under statewide, and so doing this on a project by project is really just too cumbersome and unnecessary. So working with DEP, our drainage office, obviously work closely to make sure we get this in place, and so that it's accepted as well. And so the whole idea is to provide this forward on every project, so it's somewhat generic, but yet it's still pertinent to meeting the rule, and making sure that we have everything in place ahead of time, and saving, for one, a lot of money early on and throughout the project, so that we're not doing this per project. Next slide. And this just again highlights that cost estimator tool, and kind of how we're coming up with it, and kind of walk you through, obviously through the drainage office toolbox that they have on developing all this information is in there. And I'm not going to get into the weeds of that. And as you dig into it, as part of our policy within our drainage manual and FDM, you can get that information and coordinate if necessary. If you have questions with our drainage office, so Jen Johnson, put a shout out there to her. It's one to reach out to get that necessary information, and help move these things through, and not spend a lot of time or unnecessary time on it. So next slide. And there's some QR codes for resources, so that's kind of where you can get it. I know that Jonathan in his slides kind of provided some of these links as well, but you can go to that main website at the bottom to kind of get to where you need to go. And hopefully, if anything does come up, obviously reach out to the drainage group, and they can definitely get your project moving on. Again, don't try to figure it out on your own too much, because there are resources there. It should be easy to follow, but if not, feel free to reach out. Next slide. Kind of getting back into the mindset with Ben, his world, and it kind of relates to the whole cut and fill on the roadway side of things. And the reason of bringing this one up is sometimes it has been come up in some recent very large projects, with more consideration in this activity of cut and fill needs to be done early on, so that we can kind of get the project constraints and geometry correct. And the reason this is coming in, some of these large projects, is what we're seeing is the balancing is not working out. When I'm going through engineering school, that was kind of the first thing that they try to teach you is balance. But when it gets complex, it's not as trivial. And so you got to think through the whole future phasing of the project as well as what would it look like. Because early on, we may need to get that right away early so that we can better cut and fill and balance this project. Sometimes you need to bring in, if you need to make your ponds larger, or you need to acquire some right of way so that you can get some fill material to suffice. Because what we're finding is, these long hauls on some of these jobs, especially in urbanized areas, it gets extremely expensive and somewhat cost prohibitive in some instances on these projects. So getting that understanding throughout the project, and even the construction logic into it, because you need to balance it within each phase as well. And so you got to think through that whole process. So the earlier we can kind of get some of that built in, it helps for obviously right-of-way acquisition, or setting your ponds, or setting various aspects of that project so that we make sure that we get there, because this has been constraints. You kind of go on the next slide. Kind of gets into the more of the details of what I was talking about. Obviously, we still need to make sure we're taking into account, obviously, impacts and environmental disturbances. We need to make sure that we're doing what's right and not impacting it too negatively, but just thinking ahead and how do we get there. Again, a lot of this is driven around cost savings, but also time and what kind of impacts is it gonna have as we try to bring in this material. As you can imagine, going through I-4 or downtown Tampa, bringing in material is not ideal, but sometimes you have to do it, noting the location where you can't balance your things, but we just need to think through it so that we have a game plan. And the earlier we have that game plan, we can help set that scope of the project so that game plan is kind of integrated into it of what the plan for the contractor is. Because I know that's been some big struggles on some of these large interchange and capacity projects that we've had moving forward recently. Next slide. And this one goes back to a lot what Ben was saying is, coordination. It's necessary, and especially necessary on complex projects. And the complexity can come in a lot of different ways. It can come in just what's shown here. If you're bringing in a DDI, or if you're bringing in just a complex interchange, or if there's a lot of utilities, or if there's a lot of drainage aspects there. Obviously, complex bridges is one of them. But the better the project generally is driven by the earlier integration of the team and the conversation and collaboration. Understand the why of why we're doing what we're doing, and not just taking it with face value sometimes. And question the policy. Our policy is there for a reason, but understanding that background of the policy and working with those folks helps the project long term. And obviously, from a financial perspective, we have to be cognizant of those finances, because they are not unlimited, and it's making sure that we meet that work program intent and can get these projects out there. So hopefully you kind of got that there. I think we've seen a lot of value recently in making this happen, but that early collaboration is important, and making sure you have the right people. Just because you talk to design, did you talk to the right person in design? Sometimes, and so making sure you get the right person on the call or in that loop is important. So that we'll turn it over and take it from there.
An important distinction. Thank you so much. And again, let's show some appreciation for William. He stepped in at the last minute to cover for Durwood. So we really appreciate having him here today. And great job, Ben, as well. All right. So we're going to answer any additional questions that we have offline just to keep us moving. So our next section will be streamlining PD&E with Katasha and eventually Catherine and Jonathan. So.
Yes, thanks. I was going to say we were going to tag team this one, and I think this is one that certainly will be of interest to everyone on the call, thinking about the implementation of the revisions here to that Florida statute that we talked about earlier. And before I move into that, just wanted to again reiterate the appreciation for Will and Ben being here. We are certainly working closely with them to help to bring that collaboration with PD&E and design, and especially as we're thinking about having to streamline our part of the process. I think that's going to be even more important going forward. So next slide, please. So again, the focus of this conversation is really coming from the industry bill that made some revisions to Florida Statute 334.63, which is now in effective as July 1st of 2025. And it had really two kind of components. The first component is looking at elevated alternatives for projects on limited access right-of-way, and then looking at PD&E schedules for capacity projects and new alignments to be 18 months. And so certainly there's been a lot of focus from our leadership on how we can be more efficient in the PD&E phase, as well as the federal side of things as well, thinking about all the different NEPA changes that we've been seeing over the last several years. So how might we go about trying to be a little bit more efficient? Next slide, please. We're going to start sort of by shifting our focus and being a little bit more thoughtful about having PD&E be an action step within the production pipeline. So maybe sometimes in the past it has been some of the opportunities for PD&E studies could have been more of a feasibility study or a planning study, and we really want to use those tools for their intended purposes. And those certainly are not going away, but how can we use those sort of studies and opportunities for that purpose, bringing some of that decision into the PD&E phase when it's appropriate, when we have a fun path forward to construction, let's say. So we're working very closely with leadership, with OPP, to be able to figure out how we put this into action, but that is the way we're going to be kind of taking a stab at making that a long-term solution. But as we're looking to implement this 18-month requirement now, some of the actions we've done so far is, looking at the best practices that we've seen happen over the last, say, 10 years of NEPA assignment, or maybe 8, probably 8.5, looking at how we can maybe come up with some new ideas, as well as reaching out to the districts to see what best practices that they've implemented that maybe we weren't as familiar with. Next slide, please. So what we've kind of recognized is there's maybe 3 main categories that we can focus on for now. Those are looking at the long lead time items that, maybe are the things that are sticking and making our projects take a little bit longer in the PD&E phase. Looking at alternatives development, as well as delivery strategies. And so, as I mentioned, Catherine and Jonathan are going to help me walk through some of these. And so you might hear us say some of the same things a couple times, but just to kind of re-emphasize where we're trying to go with some of these, I think it's good to be a little bit repetitive. So next slide, please. Looking at the long lead time topics, we're really looking at 3 things for the moment. That's traffic, species surveys, and cultural resource surveys, specifically for ponds. And so on the species survey side of things, there's several districts that can be affected by species surveys that, there's seasonality or time constraints, or maybe species surveys that, sort of expire after a year or two or whatever that time frame may be. They have to be redone. And so we're actively working with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service on how we can bolster our process, what we can document in the NRE that maybe isn't rising to the level of a species survey all the time, but is able to provide some assurance to them that we have enough information at the PD&E phase to understand the type of habitat, the potential for impacts, the potential for jeopardy, and getting back in return something that's a little bit more substantial than perhaps an email, and being able to really better document where we are within that consultation process. And we think it's a little bit more of a defensible process for all of us. So we'll be continuing to have those conversations with them and work through what that looks like and provide that guidance when it's ready. On the cultural resources side, and you're going to probably hear us talk about ponds a lot, but we don't always go through the process of identifying an preferred alternative for each ponds or each basin. And so cultural resources can be one of those things, right, that tends to come near the end of the PD&E process when we're looking at the surveys for the pond specifically. So what we're saying is that, again, these are, I should have said this on the last slide perhaps, but these are really tools in the toolbox for the districts to consider what's best for their project. We're not saying that this is across the board for every single project. These are options to consider depending on the project itself, the schedule, and the risks, because there might be some projects where the risk for cultural resources or the risk for species is high. We may need to go ahead and do some of this work up front. Sometimes we can reserve that work for later on when it makes sense, and all being mindful of the limited resources that we have, whether that's actual consultant time, dollars, people, etc. So just trying to keep all those things in mind as we're just making those best decisions. Next slide, please. So looking at alternatives development, for an EIS, we have to certainly look at a range of reasonable alternatives. For an EA, for a type 2, NEPA requires a build and a no build. So how can we most efficiently and effectively make those decisions? Again, for the project, maybe not always the case to just have one build alternative, but sometimes the best fit might be the best alternative to consider. We talked a lot about the stormwater rule and those changes. And if we move more toward a pond sizing approach, instead of selecting preferred alternatives for ponds and basins, because we all know that those shift a lot during the design process, we're still supporting that stormwater rule. We're still going to be looking at, what are those best management practices? What are the things that we need to make sure that we know how much right-of-way we're going to need to acquire to be able to meet the intent of the stormwater rule? We can do that through pond sizing, again, if it's appropriate for the project. Next slide, please. So delivery strategies, we have a bunch of these, and I'm going to let Catherine and Jonathan talk about these in more detail. But I think, again, it's really trying to be a little bit less risk averse at some of these things, and using the opportunities and the tools that are already in the toolbox, as well as, what can we do ourselves, such as, more document templates and eliminating unnecessary documentation. How can we find strategies or implement these things that really can help us all go faster? Whether that's the consultant having to spend a little bit less time rewriting information that we already have, whether that's, our QA/QC process internally at the district level and at the OEM level. Maybe by streamlining some of this documentation, we don't have to spend quite as much time back and forth with the comments and the comment resolution process. Again, because a lot of this information is already documented within the technical documents, summarizing information in our environmental document, much more streamlined fashion will, I think, help us all get to the finish line a little bit faster. Next slide, please. So as we kind of implement all of these different types of strategies, we are going to be developing performance metrics within our SWEP tool so we can better monitor all of the different actions happening there. Currently, we're really only monitoring the submittals as they come in from the district for OEM review. So we've been able to track our progress and our turnaround time for since NEPA assignment started. But we're really going to be starting to be able to put these metrics in at many steps in the process to make sure that we're meeting not only the 18-month requirement, but other turnaround times, and just making sure we kind of can see where there's patterns and areas that maybe we need to refocus. Maybe we've implemented certain of these efficiencies. And maybe now we're seeing another pattern pop up that, hey, let's focus on this now. How can we solve this problem? Or is there a challenge that we're facing that we need to remove a roadblock in order to keep our pipeline clear and moving through the approval process efficiently? So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Catherine to have a little bit more detail about some of these topics.
Okay, thank you, Katasha. And as Katasha mentioned, we have the two new rules that are coming into law, the elevated roadways and the 18-month PD&E schedule. So what we've decided on the elevated roadways for any project that's beginning PD&E after or on July 1st, 2025, then an elevated roadway must be considered one of the build alternatives. So you'll have to have a minimum of two well, at least the elevated roadway will be one of your build alternatives. However, if you're still in the concept studies or planning phase, that build alternative can be evaluated at that time. I'm going to talk a little bit later about how we do the planning and environmental linkages, or PEL, and how we make those documents go forward into our NEPA documentation. So the elevated roadways could be looked at a little bit earlier in the concept phase. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the strategies to meet the 18-month PD&E study, optimizing planning studies, and reducing the reports and redundancies within the report. Next slide, please. So one thing that wasn't really mentioned by Katasha was a strategy to reduce time that is currently available. This is kind of a concept to concrete option, and it's to do a PD&E with design overlap. This, as I mentioned, isn't anything new. It's outlined in the PD&E manual, part 1, chapter 4. It should be considered for projects with construction scheduled in the near term. Some benefits to this is it reduces the overall schedule and reduces rework between PD&E and design. It works best for projects that only have one build alternative. As I mentioned before, it's less rework, and it provides more complete information for the PD&E study, such as we'd have complete survey, both horizontal and vertical, which we don't always have for a PD&E study. Also have complete utility locations and geotech that can be useful for getting that better PD&E drainage and project costs. You can include design greater than 60%, but it's still preferable if we have location design concept approval prior to that. And just realize any design that's design work past that done will be done at risk if it's done before LDCA. But some of the benefits we can get out of it is by completing design early, we could eliminate the need for the right-of-way and construction reevaluation, which can be contingent on the time after the LDCA. And also by doing design and PD&E concurrently, it should result in fewer design changes requiring reevaluation. Next slide, please. So a couple of ways to reduce PD&E time are currently available and in use by some districts are pond sizing instead of pond siting and doing traffic prior to PD&E. So the biggest advantage to pond sizing is there's no loss effort or if a pond site changes. So no lost effort if or when, because we know it happens a lot, if pond site changes in design. It can speed up the PD&E by reducing the amount of field work for cultural or species resources. The biggest concern with doing pond sizing versus siting is the possibility of encountering unknown issues in design, such as cultural or species impacts or contamination. You just don't really know what you're getting if you don't do it earlier. Obtaining traffic prior to PD&E is currently being done in a few districts. Usually traffic, as Katasha mentioned, is one of the first milestones of the PD&E process and sets the stage for the alternatives and typical sections. So having that information early saves time in the PD&E. It can also reduce updates to the purpose and need between the ETDM screening and PD&E. However, the biggest challenge is making sure that the traffic data is still current. There can't be too much of a lag between ETDM and PD&E, and you have to be cognizant of any land use changes that could affect the traffic data. Next slide, please. So we're currently working on some changes to our processes to reduce the time for preparing and reviewing documents. We're creating SWEP templates for both the preliminary engineering report and the natural resource report. But before the templates are created, we're taking a hard look at the two standard reports and trying to make them more streamlined. For example, for the PER, we'll no longer include so much repeated information, both within the PER itself and repeated information within the environmental document. So the PER will be much shorter than the current PERs. For the NRE, we'll have species description built into it as sort of a pick list. So the NREs will have a more consistent language between the districts. We're also working on some report templates, which will be in the future have standard summaries that can be dropped right into the PER or the environmental document. So right now we're working on the contamination screening evaluation report. We finished the template for the noise study report, and we'll begin maybe looking at different reports such as the location hydraulics report. So in short, these report templates will result in standard language and tables that will be easily copied into or possibly automatically uploaded into the environmental document and the PER as required. So other ways we're looking at reducing the time for the PD&E study is something called NEPA in a rectangle. So for this, we would consider clearing an area in PD&E rather than looking at alternative alignments and nailing down a preferred alternative. So this would give more latitude when it gets into design. Also, an option for reducing time would be to look at just one build alternative for a PD&E project. For example, right now we might look at a typical widening project. We'd look at left, right, center. From now on, we'd just be looking at a build alternative and leave the actual location and wiggling the alignment around to design. And then finally, we're considering identifying constraints that will help us identify the alternatives. Next slide, please. So I don't know if this is good news or bad news, but we're doing away with the alternative corridor evaluation or the ACE process. We've been finding that the ACE reports were taking a long time and were beginning to look like mini PD&E studies, which was not really helping us with the timeline. So we wanted to take advantage of Rule 23 USC 168, which is the integration of planning and environmental review. The FHWA years ago developed an approach to this called Planning and Environmental Linkages, or PEL. So you hear us talking about the PEL planning studies. So by optimizing the PEL, we can reduce rework in PD&E. The planning studies can be more focused. For example, it could be a feasibility or an operational study rather than like a full-blown environmental study that we tend to do for ACE now. So some of the items that can be carried from the PEL and adopted in the PD&E include traffic studies, environmental studies, and even elimination of alternatives. A couple of the requirements you have to remember for if you're going to be using the PEL study is it's got to be completed within 5 years. It has to include agency and public involvement. So for our proposed process, we will use the ETDM planning screen to get the agency's input. Public involvement may be project specific, or it will be project specific. Probably will include more than just the ETDM screening, but like I said, it'll be project description, project specific. And guidance document is coming soon. And with that, I will turn it over to Jonathan.
Go to the next slide. Thank you, Catherine. And just building on what Catherine and Katasha have been discussing, We have some delivery strategies, both on the immediate utilization and some that are coming up here as we get them developed and built into SWEPT. So just want to be able to remind everyone to be able to utilize the full range of those type 1 categorical exclusions. This is fully supported within the PD&E manual, that part 1, chapter 2, and they're approved by the district. You'd be surprised how much can fit within operational right away, or if it is not exceeding a certain funding type, but then also that was our C list 22 and 23, but then we also have D list, which also provides a lot of flexibility. So as long as the project is not a capacity improvement, it's not going to be a brand new roadway, a major realignment, or a major bridge reconstruct that's providing access to new areas as well. It can potentially fall in as a type 1 categorical exclusion and help with that immediate delivery of the project. Those type 1s aren't reviewed by OEM, so get it approved by the district and just keep on chugging. While some of the analysis that might go into it might be on the level of what a type 2 would have been in the past, it can still be supportive of that type 1 CE. Some challenges is just adhering to that perception, trying to make sure that those type 1 CEs are appropriately documented, and just moving forward that way. And go on to the next slide for another strategy. One of the other strategies that we're working on, as Katasha and Catherine alluded to, was streamlining that type 2 CE form, trying to tabularize a lot of the data from some of the resources. This will help reduce duplication errors. It'll help produce a faster document just building it out. And it'll also reduce both OEM and district review times when they're looking at just the data that's needed to help support the NEPA decision. Some challenges here we're looking at, timely updates to SWEPT. It does take some time to get that type 2 CE reorganized and rebuilt. Then we're going to have to communicate the new process of the type 2, both the staff and our stakeholders that are utilizing our statewide environmental project tracker, our SWEPT program. And we're also going to have to reassess and reproduce that QA/QC checklist and get it back out to the districts for everyone. Moving on along to the next slide, please. Another strategy for when we have environmental assessments is doing a one-page finding of no significant impact, that FONSI. It's already being utilized by some other states and the military. It reduces the preparation and review time for the consultants and both the district staff. It also helps enable some faster reviews from OEM. Not anticipating any initial challenges with that right offhand, besides communicating out that this is the option, or this is available, and we're moving in that direction. And then if you can move to the next slide. We are looking to move all of the environmental document reviews into SWEPT as well. So this will, as Katasha was mentioning, add the tracking and timelines for both districts and the consultant reviews and responses, but it's also going to place the environmental documents development, review, and approval all within the one application. You're not going to have to take it out from SWEPT, put it into something else, and put it back into SWEPT. Again, challenges the time it needs to implement that within the SWEPT, and then clearly communicating our new processes that will come out of this. And if you can go to the next slide, I have some other news from the quality and performance section. If you have access to the area of interest tool, you will see that you now have the wildlife crossing report, and this can help out in some of your PD&E and smaller projects. Where the wildlife crossing report can help identify some of those wildlife connectivities. It's broken into 4 tiers. The collision and vehicle hotspots. It also helps identify habitat, wetland, and species occurrence, and identify some of those crossing opportunities and conflicts. If you can go on to the next slide. As Katasha mentioned, great shout out to our OEM help desk. Just to show you how busy it has been, the first 3 quarters of 2025 has already surpassed the full total amount of 2024 help desk requests. So not only are you busy, we're also busy responding to that, but we do appreciate anytime you run into problems, let us know. If you don't let us know it's broken, we can't fix it for you. And with that, I believe I am turning it back on over to our wonderful moderators.
And thank you so much. Yes, let's show some appreciation to Katasha, Jonathan, and Catherine for getting us out right at time. Thank you all so much for sticking with us today. We really appreciate it. Our last question of the day was going to be what you would like to see at the next forum, topics, etc. So we're trying to let y'all out right on time. So if you do have any suggestions for topics for the next forum, please feel free to reach out to any of our staff. And let us know. Thank you again so much. Katasha, did you want to close us out?
I'll just reiterate, thank you all for sticking with us. We hope you found this informative. Thank you so much to our speakers. I know Corey's probably had to leave already, but again, thank you to Will and Ben and everyone else who made this successful. Siobhan, Jennifer, thank you as well. So look forward to doing this again in the spring. Have a great one, y'all.